The camera showed a man walking into his own funeral, but according to every official record he was already dead. For almost 50 years, Greer Funeral Home stood at the end of Willow Street, a quiet white building with black shutters, polished wooden doors, and a sign that never changed. Families in Ashford Falls came there when they had nowhere else to go. The owner, Arthur Greer, was known as a respectful man. Soft voice, clean suit, no gossip, no questions asked. He handled every service like it was sacred. But after Arthur died at 81, his daughter found a locked storage room behind the chapel. Inside were old flower stands, guest books, broken frames, and a wall of dusty VHS tapes. Most were labeled by year: 1996, 2001, 2007, 2014. But one tape had no date, only 3 words written on the spine. They came back. She played it once. Then she called the police. Detective Lena Hart arrived at Greer Funeral Home just after sunset. Arthur's daughter, Melissa, was waiting in the chapel. She had not moved the tape. She had not touched the VCR. She only pointed to the small screen in the office and said, "You need to see this yourself." The footage was grainy, black and white. Camera pointed toward the funeral chapel from a high corner near the ceiling. At first, Lena saw nothing unusual. Rows of chairs, casket at the front, flowers on both sides. Then the timestamp appeared: May the 14th, 2003. The service was for a man named Robert Haines. Lena knew that name. Robert had been declared dead after a car accident, but on the recording, Robert Haines walked into his own funeral. He stood in the back row, watched the service, then looked directly into the camera. Lena paused the tape. The room went silent. Melissa whispered, "That's impossible." But the man on the screen was not a shadow, not a reflection, not someone who looked similar. It was Robert Haines. Same face, same scar near his left eyebrow, same slow way of turning his head that Lena remembered from old news footage. Robert had been a local accountant, quiet, married, no criminal record. His death had been accepted without much question. The body was identified quickly. The service was small. Then the case disappeared into town history. But the camera had captured something different. Robert was alive during his own funeral, and he was not alone. As Lena let the tape continue, another figure entered behind him: Arthur Greer, the funeral director. Arthur did not look surprised. He looked like he was waiting. The next tape was labeled, "Service Room, 2007. Lena expected another angle of the same funeral. Instead, the footage showed a different service. This one was for Evelyn Marks, a school secretary who had supposedly passed away after a house fire. Her family had buried a closed casket. The official report said identification had been handled privately. But on Arthur's security footage, Evelyn Marks appeared through the side door of the chapel. She wore a dark coat. Her hair was shorter. Her face was pale and tense. She stood behind the last row of chairs while her own framed photo sat near the flowers. Then Arthur walked over and handed her a folded paper. Evelyn read it, shook her head, and left through the same door. 3 days later, her husband sold their house and moved away. By midnight, Lena had watched 5 tapes, 5 services, 5 people declared dead, 5 people appearing alive at their own funerals: Robert Haines, Evelyn Marks, Caleb Rowe, Marina Bell, Thomas Pierce. All of them were from Ashford Falls. All of them had closed casket funerals. All of them had deaths that were accepted too quickly. And all of them appeared on Arthur Greer's private funeral home camera. The strangest part was not that they came back. It was how calm Arthur seemed. He opened doors for them, passed notes, pointed toward exits. Never once did he act frightened. Lena checked the guest books for those services. Each one had the same final signature, written at the bottom of the page. Not a name, a symbol, a small black square. The black square meant nothing to Melissa. She said her father had never mentioned it. But she remembered something else. Arthur had one rule inside the funeral home: no one was allowed to enter the basement. Not employees, not family, not even Melissa. He said it was for storage: old records, chemicals, broken chairs. But when Lena searched the basement, she found something cleaner than storage. A narrow room with filing cabinets, a desk, a phone line, and a metal box filled with identification documents. Different names, different birth dates, different towns. But the photographs were familiar: Robert Haines, Evelyn Marks, Caleb Rowe, Marina Bell, Thomas Pierce. Every person who had appeared on the tapes had been given a new identity. Arthur Greer had not been burying people. He had been helping them disappear. At first, Lena thought Arthur had been protecting them. Maybe they were witnesses. Maybe they were running from dangerous people. Maybe the funeral home was part of some secret escape network. But then she found the second box. This one was hidden behind a false panel under the basement stairs. Inside were envelopes of cash, photographs, signed statements, and letters from people begging Arthur to let them come home. One letter was from Marina Bell. It said, "You promised it was temporary." Another was from Caleb Rowe. It said, "You said my family would be safe if I stayed gone." Lena read the letters twice. The truth became darker. Some people had not chosen to vanish. They had been convinced they had no other way out. Arthur Greer had been offering escape, but escape had become control. The oldest tape was from 1996. It showed a service for a woman named Diane Mercer. Her case had never been questioned. Diane was a bank clerk. She was said to have died during a storm after her car was found near the river. The funeral happened 4 days later. On the tape, Diane entered the chapel through the back door. She looked younger than Lena expected. Terrified, Arthur Greer placed a hand on her shoulder and led her toward the office. Then another man appeared on the screen. Tall, gray suit, silver hair. He never looked at the mourners, only at Diane. Melissa froze when she saw him. Lena asked if she knew the man. Melissa nodded. "That's Judge Calloway, the same judge who had signed several death certificates connected to the funeral home." Judge Henry Calloway had retired 10 years earlier. People in Ashford Falls still spoke of him with respect. He had served on charity boards, spoken at memorials, helped fund the town library, and every year, he sent flowers to Greer Funeral Home on Arthur's birthday. That detail was in Arthur's personal calendar. Lena searched the calendar page by page. Several dates were circled in black ink. Each circled date matched one of the funeral tapes. Besides some of them, Arthur had written short notes. HC confirmed. Family convinced. New papers ready. Do not let her speak. The initials were obvious. HC Henry Calloway. Arthur had managed the funerals, but someone else had made the disappearances official. Someone with enough power to make records look clean. The break came from a tape labeled, "Private Viewing. Do not archive." It was from 2014. The service was for Thomas Pierce, a local reporter. Thomas had been investigating missing town funds before he supposedly died. On the footage, Thomas entered the chapel after everyone had left. He looked straight at the camera and held up a folded note. Then he walked toward Arthur's office. For 2 minutes, nothing happened. Then the office door opened. Arthur stepped out alone. Thomas did not appear again. Lena enhanced the frame of the note Thomas had held up. The writing was blurry, but readable. "If I disappear twice, check the camera." Lena leaned back from the screen. Thomas had known. He knew the first death was staged, and he feared the second one would be real. Lena searched for Thomas Pierce's original reporting. Most of his articles were missing from the newspaper archive, but Melissa found a box of clippings, hidden in Arthur's office ceiling. Thomas had been writing about a private group called the Ashford Trust. On paper, it supported widows, children, and historic preservation. In practice, it controlled land deals, court decisions, and police silence. People who learned too much were given a choice: leave forever or be destroyed publicly. Arthur's funeral home made leaving look official. Judge Calloway made the paperwork legal. The town mourned. The files closed. The person disappeared. Thomas had started asking why so many closed casket funerals happened around the same names, and why Arthur Greer's chapel camera recorded every service. Thomas did not just suspect the truth. He left a trail. Inside the final drawer of Arthur's desk, Lena found a small key. It opened a cabinet beside the chapel organ. Inside was one last tape. No label, no date, only a strip of paper wrapped around it. "After me." The footage began in Arthur's office. Arthur sat alone at his desk. Older, tired, afraid. He looked directly at the camera and said, "If you found this, then I waited too long." He admitted he had helped people disappear for decades. At first, he said, he believed he was saving them. Then the powerful men of Ashford Falls took over the system. They used it to erase problems. Witnesses, reporters, employees, spouses, anyone who knew too much. Arthur said he kept the tapes because someday, someone would need proof. The confession did not clear Arthur. It made everything worse. He had known. He had helped. He had stayed silent. But he had also kept the only record that could expose the town. Lena watched the final minutes of the tape. Arthur named 6 people from the Ashford Trust: Judge Calloway, a former police chief, a banker, a real estate developer, a county clerk, and the owner of the local newspaper. Then Arthur held up a photograph. It showed the back hallway of Greer Funeral Home. A man was standing there, not one of the powerful men. Thomas Pierce, alive, older, watching Arthur from the doorway. Arthur whispered, "He came back." Then the footage cut to black. Lena realized the story was not finished. One of the dead men had returned. Thomas Pierce was found 3 counties away. He was living under another name in a small apartment above a hardware store. He did not deny who he was. He only asked one question: "Is Arthur dead?" When Lena said yes, Thomas sat down and covered his face. He said Arthur had helped him vanish after he received threats. But later, Thomas learned others had not been protected. They had been trapped. Some were forced to live under new names. Some were kept silent with threats against their families. Thomas had spent years gathering proof. He was the one who sent Arthur the final photograph. He was the one who wrote, "If I disappear twice, check the camera." And he was the reason Arthur finally recorded his confession. The dead had not come back to haunt the funeral home. They came back to expose it. Greer Funeral Home closed before the trial began. The black shutters were removed. The sign came down. Families gathered outside, not for a service, but for answers. Some learned their relatives had not died when they were told. Some learned their loved ones had spent years living under names they never chose. Some never got the answers they wanted. But the tapes changed everything. A funeral home camera had watched what the whole town refused to see: people walking into their own funerals, a judge signing away their lives, a director opening doors that should have stayed closed. Arthur Greer built a business around grief. Then he buried the truth inside his own walls. For years, Ashford Falls believed the dead were gone, but one camera kept recording. And in the end, the funeral home did not reveal who died. It revealed who lied. This was Docket Stories, where every case file has a story. Subscribe for the next case.